Hi, this is Patrick Brice from the Creep series, and There's Someone Inside Your House and Corporate Animals, and this is Don't Go Out There.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Don't Go Out There Horror Movie Podcast. We appreciate y'all tuning in. We are honored to be joined by another legend in the horror genre, Mr. Patrick Brice. Patrick, how are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me, guys.
Absolutely.
It's our honor. We really appreciate your time. And we always like to start all of our interviews just by asking our guests, what is it that got you into the business? I know you went to Cal Arts School of Film and Video, but was that always your dream to get into filmmaking?
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to be a filmmaker since I was in my early teens. I think a lot of people who make movies, like going to the movie theater was their inspiration or whatever for making stuff. But for me, it was definitely watching stuff on videotape, on VHS, and renting movies from the rental store. That was kind of my initial education when it came to filmmaking. And was something I became quickly obsessed with. I grew up in Northern California in a small town, kind of in the middle of the woods, and so that was like my outlet to civilization. Basically, was watching movies, and so I'm very grateful for that. And that's sort of what sort of helped guide me towards there being a bigger world out there. I actually didn't go to Cal Arts until I was in my mid 20s. I dropped out of high school and was taking community college classes and working, and so I had sort of a windy path before I finally hunkered down and went back to school, and was able to do that, because I'd sort of, worked for a while, and so I went back to school as like an older student, which was great because it meant that I kind of knew what I wanted to get out of film school, which I think when people have issues about film school, I think a lot of times that's they're hoping that that these folks have something to give them that they're paying for, but it's really sort of like on you to get what you want out of it. And so I'm grateful to have gone back as an older student,
Right.
Awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so Patrick, you're obviously most known for the Creep franchise, which we will definitely get to. But I want to ask about some of your other projects first. Specifically, in 2015, you wrote and directed The Overnight, with Adam Scott, Jason Schwartzman. What was that experience like coming off of Creep?
It was really surreal because Creep had not come out yet. We had shot it, and we're basically still in the middle of working on it, still in the middle of tweaking it, because that movie had a really long post-production process where we would go back and reshoot things, and Blumhouse came on board about, I don't know, 6 months after we finished or so, and helped us sort of guide us towards making it more of a horror movie. It was kind of a like dark comedy with horror elements before.
Right.
Those guys got involved, and then they helped sort of push it more into the horror direction, which I'm really grateful for because I think it's a much better movie because of that. And so it was like during that process that I came up with the idea for The Overnight with Mark, where we were just sort of like Mark Duplass, and we were sort of just talking about he loves to make things kind of in a DIY small scale way, and so we were coming up with ideas that you could make in a single location with 4 characters, and that was where this concept for these two couples meeting each other and having this night where one couple is really trying to figure out what's going on with the other couple and whether it's something more or less sinister than they think it is, and so it was written to be a comedy, but definitely had some of those elements of narrative tension that are in Creep and in my other movies for sure.
Right.
But it was great because I'd never made a real movie. I'd never made a movie Creep. Creep felt like an experiment. It felt like the stuff that I was making when I was at school, and so to be able to make a movie with amazing actors who were really great at their job, but at that scale was really great because I didn't find myself in over my head, I'm
Right.
sure I would have felt if I was directing a multi-million-dollar movie as my first movie. You know, it was a nice way to sort of dip into filmmaking and you know, kind of learn as I go in a lot of ways. I was really following my instincts, you know.
Right. So, what was it actually working with Adam Scott and Jason Schwartzman? I mean, sounds awesome.
Yeah, they're both really incredible improvisers, and they're just great actors. And so, you know, I'd written a script, but I think part of the sort of ethos in making this movie was like, yes, we have this script, but we wanted to create enough of a buffer that people could also improvise if they wanted to and make adjustments. And there were some slight adjustments that we made as we went along, but for the most part, it was as written. The movie takes place in 24 hours, and so most of it takes place at night. And so we actually shot at night, which we probably didn't have to do. Like, we could have shot day for night and, you know, closed all the windows and everything. But there was something about actually staying up late, and there was something about, you know, being in the house that we were in, which was kind of in the hills near Lake Hollywood and on the sort of east side of LA, that was important, I think, to you know, the sort of ambiance of the movie and the feeling of the film. And so I'm just really grateful to have had that experience with those guys, where I wasn't really like second guessed, you know, and
Right.
and I was also like kind of figuring out and learning as I went. So it was ideal for me, as like coming off of Creep, which felt like this experimental thing that I was also acting in. So there's this like pressure for me, and you know, I wasn't really an actor before I made that movie. The only reason why I was in it was because we wanted to make something with no crew that was just me and Mark, at least for the initial production of it.
Right.
And so by default, I became an actor in it. But you know, so for me, like, I was just so happy to be working with people that like knew what they were doing and were having fun, and like also like recognized the freedom of what we were doing, you know. And so it was one of the greatest gifts I've ever had as a filmmaker, being able to make that movie. Because I think from an economic perspective too, like making that movie and being able to like take it to a festival and sell it, like that only could exist in that landscape 10 years ago. It
Right.
sort of it's a different world now, you know.
Right.
So you also went on to do a movie called Corporate Animals in 2019, which had a ridiculous cast. I mean, Demi Moore, Ed Helms, and State Senator Clay Davis. Sorry, Isaiah Whitlock. I'm a huge fan of The Wire, so he's always Clay Davis to me. But what was that experience like? I recently watched that movie on Peacock, and it was hilarious. I laughed from start to finish, but it's so very different from Creep, which is how I got introduced to you.
Yeah. No. Thanks for watching that. I'm quite fond of that movie. It's very funny because like that movie was also a movie that we shot in a very short amount of time. We shot it in 17 days, I think.
Wow.
And it was 10 actors in every scene every day, so it was like very intense and kind of hard shoot. But those actors all became super close with each other and vibed so well. And I mean, it was crazy because that was originally supposed to star Sharon Stone. That was who we had originally cast in Demi's role, and
Wow.
she ended up dropping out 2 weeks before we shot the movie. And we had already built this giant cave set, and it was you know, a ton of money had already been spent, and we were basically going to like shut the whole movie down if we weren't able to cast someone else that had the same value as her. And we sent the script to Demi, and she read it quickly and was on a plane to New Mexico like 2 days later. And like,
Wow.
that's and then was also just the nicest, coolest person in the world the entire time we shot, and like didn't complain once, even though it was a very difficult shoot and very scrappy, I'm sure, compared to what she was used to at that point in her career. And so I just like I just love her to death, and I'm like so grateful to see all this praise that's been heaped upon her, deservedly so, from the substance, because I think that movie also did a really good job of playing to her strengths as an actor, and was just so good, and so she deserves it. She deserves every bit of this. Like she is that person, and so and then it was a chance to just cast all these actors that I was fans of, like Dan Bacadol is someone who has shown up everywhere. He's in Veep. He's in all kinds of movies, and he's just always funny and reliable. Martha Kelly from Baskets and Euphoria, which is just one of the driest line deliveries you've ever heard in your life, is also super great and funny. And then having Isaiah Whitlock, who I think he does. I can't remember. Does he say she in the movie? I can't remember.
He doesn't do it because I was waiting for it.
Yeah,
but he definitely has some Clay Davis isms.
yeah. He's just every word that comes out of that guy's mouth is hilarious. And him playing it straight in a comedy like that is super funny. And so, it's funny because that movie's probably I would say, least liked of all my movies for the most part. And so, and I get it. If it's one of those things where you kind of have to buy into the fact that you're going to watch an absurdist comedy,
right.
And that's kind of dumb on purpose in a lot of ways, and I think if you buy that ticket, you'll have a good time, but if you're expecting anything else, you won't have a good time. But I love it, though.
Yeah, so I'm gonna pick it for us to review because after I watched it, it's one of the funniest movies I've seen in a long time. And another guy that was great in it was Callum Worthy. I saw him in the movie Bodied recently, also, and his comedic timing and delivery, he crushes it. So. Yeah, you'll definitely be getting high praise when we do that review, at least for me, because I love it.
Thanks. I appreciate that. Yeah, I hope the rest of you guys dig it. And yeah, Callum is Callum's incredible. I mean, he was someone who, when we do these big scenes, people like Dan Bacadol, who's acted with everyone and any funny person you can imagine, he would come over to me and say who is that kid? Who is this who is this Canadian wunderkind? He's just incredible. And so. I'm so glad you dug him because I love him to death.
Same.
Yeah, well, I mean, you've come on the show, so you automatically get bonus points on any review that we do for you.
Good.
With on the voice. So the last one I want to ask about before we jump into Creep, there's someone inside your house. I mean, that's a fun teen horror slasher film. What can you tell us about working on that?
Yeah, I mean, it was very different than any other experience I'd had, not just in terms of the scale of it, but also it was essentially the first and only big studio movie that I've made so far, and went into it making it for Netflix in 2019, which was kind of felt like that was when they were near the height of
peak,
what in terms of the amount of stuff they were making, in terms of original films. I think that's definitely scaled back a lot since the pandemic and the strike. And so it was great to be able to make a movie that had what felt like pretty endless resources within reason, but very comfortable, and be able to make it with James Wan's company and Sean Levy's company, and then their producers Dan Cohen and Michael Clear, who are just incredible producers. And so I think when you're working with a place like Netflix, I think what makes the difference between a good and bad experience in a lot of ways is who's producing your movie and what their relationship is like with the studio. And I think because I was working with both of those guys and they were just so beloved by the studio and they trusted them implicitly, it meant we could kind of do what we wanted to do. And so, I got to cast really great actors that I got my first pick on all the actors that were in the movie. I got to shoot it in the way that I wanted to. I wanted it to feel cinematic and a little bigger than most movies that I'd seen on Netflix at that point. And so I'm really proud of like how it's shot. I think it's it's quite beautiful. The guy that shot it is this DP named Jeff Cutter. He actually shot the remake of Nightmare on Elm Street, and which wasn't a great movie, but it was well shot. And then he shot 10 Cloverfield Lane, which was a great movie and
Yes,
well shot. At least I thought. And he just shot Prey, the Predator update.
That's amazing too.
Yeah. So I was really grateful to like get to work with just like amazingly skilled technicians. It was a very hard shoot. We shot in Vancouver, and we ran into weather, and so it ended up being this thing where we were having to bounce back and forth, and then COVID happened in the middle of it, and so it became this like extra long process finishing that movie and getting it out in the world. And so to have gone through that, spending that much time on something, and then have it come out on Netflix, which like having your movie released on Netflix is like just dropping it into this giant bucket of other movies,
Right.
and I never really felt that more than that experience. It's very interesting because I've had 2 and 3, if you count Creep 2, different experiences when it comes to having your movie come out into the world on Netflix. One is, There's Someone Inside Your House, which was a movie that had all this money behind it and was this big thing, and it came out and it was the #1 movie that week, and then it went away, like most Netflix originals, whereas Creep came out on Netflix in 2015 and was a slow burn in terms of how it sort of entered the cultural landscape, and
Right.
truly was a cult film, and as an example of a time where a Netflix movie could become a cult film, where people would slowly discover it, and through
Exactly.
word of mouth and whatnot would sort of be able to build this audience to the point that it would not only necessitate a sequel, but then also like have us go back and make a TV show spin-off after that. So it's really interesting because I've been lucky in my career to be able to like hop on board some waves, but also realize that those waves will eventually crest and dissipate, and then a new one will emerge in some way. So it's definitely been a trip, and to be talking about it at this point in my career, I already feel like I've gone through 2 or 3 of those just in the last 10 years.
Yeah. So with Creep and The Overnight, you pulled double duty as writer and director, whereas with Corporate Animals and There's Someone Inside Your House, you only directed. How different is the experience when making a film when you're not the one who wrote it? Is it easier, or I guess less stressful, or does it add another level of stress due to bringing someone else's words to life?
Yeah, I mean, I go back and forth. I think what's nice about Creep is I consider that almost its own thing. I mean, Mark and I write those together, and
Right.
so I feel like I do have support when it comes to the writing duties there. Also, when I made The Overnight, it was that was kind of the first and only one of my movies that I've just been the sole writer on and director, and that was not as stressful because I felt like I had really smart, good collaborators who were open to changing things as we worked, who had great ideas to contribute as we were making the movies. Like I love collaboration, and I love like the act of like making things together, and that's just the only way I know how to do this. And so having a writer on both There's Someone Inside Your House and Corporate Animals was just a huge relief for me, because I could have lines that I wanted or ideas that I wanted put in the movie, but it was someone else that was actually being the sort of keeper of the story, keeper of the main sort of trajectory of everything in their head. And so being able to have someone else who that was their responsibility, all the while I was having to like make all the, every million decisions a day that you're making as a director, trying to not doubt yourself, hoping to God it's the right one, So to have someone else who was sort of doing that and be someone who I really trusted, so on Corporate Animals, that was Sam Bain, who created the show Peep Show, which is my favorite sitcom of all time. It's a British comedy show. It's really, really funny and raw and just great. The guy that co-created it with Sam went on to create Succession, Jesse Armstrong. And so I had someone who's just really smart and funny, who I trusted and respected, as my right-hand man, writer. And then for there's someone inside your house, I didn't really know Henry, the writer, beforehand, but through working together, we developed a really close, tight relationship, and he's just one of my dear friends. And I think also going through the trauma of having to make a movie during COVID and how long it took to make it just really bonded us. So, I don't think. I think I feel like I've got good enough instincts that I wouldn't go into one of these relationships where I didn't think that I would be able to work with the person or trust the person or that we weren't on the same page, because these movies they end up taking years of your life, and they end up being this, even when they're done, they're just this stamp of oh, there's 3 years of my life. And so I'm not going to, I think just out of instinct, I'm just not going to go into that with someone who I don't want to spend that much time with. I've been very lucky. I'm still close with everyone I've ever worked with, or just appreciate everyone I've ever worked with, because it's always hard, and you're always having to find yourself in the most vulnerable position possible. And if that's not with someone you trust, then that can be a bad situation. And I hear horror stories, and I know there's bad versions of that. I love reading about that, just being a masochist and loving movies. And so some of my favorite books are about disaster experiences filmmaking with egomaniacs and stuff like that. But I think also I've read enough about that to know I would want to avoid that at all costs in my personal life.
Yeah. So I got to ask, you said something there that struck me. You said Peep Show is your favorite sitcom. So how does Mark feel about that? I mean, for me, The League's up there. I mean, that was shocking.
Sorry, what was the first thing you said?
You said Peep Show was your favorite sitcom. So
oh, yeah.
You better not let Mark hear that. It's got to be The League, right?
Yeah. The League's great, though.
Yeah,
I love all those actors so much.
Yeah. All right, Brice. All right, now for the main event. Creep, it came out in 2015 and instantly became a cult classic that spawned a sequel film and a series. I read that you and Mark Duplass came up with the idea together, just after a series of conversations. Can you give us some details about how it all came together?
Sure. Yeah. We were talking about making a movie. I was coming out of school. Mark was kind of mentoring me, sort of being someone that was just sort of a sounding board to bounce ideas off of. He had added his name to my thesis film as a producer just to help me get into film festivals and stuff like that. But this was a film that it was not a narrative film, it was a documentary. But he dug it, and I think saw a shared sensibility in me and shared sense of humor. And
right.
It was in those conversations that we basically were what's a way that we can make a movie together that wouldn't have a crew at all, that would have that we wouldn't have anyone telling us what to do at all. And sort of it was out of that we came up with this concept of this videographer being hired to film this guy who was supposedly dying of cancer, and then slowly learning that he's lying and that he's actually a disturbed individual, and how to toe that line, And so what was really cool about that was I don't think I knew what I was doing to the point that I didn't I wasn't like stopping myself because something didn't work in the moment. There was always this, oh, we'll figure it out. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And so I think because of that, sort of, I don't know, like it meant I wasn't afraid to just try things out. And I think because it was just me and Mark, and because it was improvised, we could sort of play in this way. It almost felt like um, improv theater, but we were filming it. You know what I
Right.
mean? And so we were able to then go back and watch things and then hone in on ideas and that's not working, so let's cut that out, or let's make a point on this one thing that was mentioned, or this one look that was given in this one scene. And I think it was a very safe environment to be able to do that with, because we didn't really know each other that well at the time, but there was a mutual trust there. I was just a film school graduate, and he was, this sort of like Sundance darling whose movies I hadn't really seen before. I'd seen Baghead, but I hadn't really seen any of his other stuff. And so to be able to do that with somebody who was like really good at improvisation and following his instincts there, I'm just eternally, just sort of thankful for, because I think it was not only a way for us to do this project together, but it was a way for me to like learn by trial and error
Right.
how to make something and how to like craft something that's not perfect from the jump. You know what I mean? I think what would have probably tripped me up as a filmmaker in a big way had I not met Mark is like the need to, or the feeling of needing to like make a perfect movie or a perfect product like right out of the gate. And there were so many terrible cuts of Creep before the final one that I had to like sit through and show to people and get notes on and beat my head against a wall figuring out what's the solution for this problem that we're having. And if I hadn't have gone through that process, it wouldn't have prepared me for making movies on a much bigger scale, for sure.
Right.
And it would have been less hard to like trust the process and trust the parts of the process that don't work and that don't feel good, because most of it actually doesn't feel good.
Okay.
I mean, I've sort of painted myself into a corner in that this is all I want to do and this is all I know how to do, so I have to keep doing it. But a lot of it's really painful, and you have definitely those moments where you're like, oh, this is the right line this person should say, or this is the actor we should cast in this movie, or this is the cut that should happen, or this is the song that we should put here, or whatever. But like most of it is, oh, I can't do this because of this,
Right.
or this thing that I saw in my head is not translating to either the page, or it's not translating from the page to the screen. And so, it's a wild thing to be doing with our
Right.
lives. And so I'm very grateful to have Creep, which is like, once again, just like this pure back to basics way of making things that we have kept going forward with the sequel and with the show. We shoot the show on the same camera that we shot the first movie on.
Oh wow.
And we sort of craft each of those episodes almost as mini versions of the first movie, where we'll come up with an idea that we can shoot in an Airbnb with an actor or two, and then go from there with it. And because this character is sort of this like onion of a insane person,
Right.
that has these like crazy layers to him, we can just pick one or two to explore with each episode, and go from there.
Well, you kind of answered my next follow-up question, where you talked about the struggle and the different cuts of the first Creep that you showed to people and struggled with it. Was there ever a point in time when you said, all right, this is it, this is my final cut, and you were proud of it? and you were about to release it into the public, was there ever any time where you were like, you know what, this might be lightning in a bottle. This might blow up bigger than. Were you ever at that point, or were you still very?
No, I don't know. I never felt confident once the entire time. I mean, I remember right before we premiered at South by Southwest, just shaking in my boots, being so scared whether or not people were going to dig the movie. You know, because even the last test screening we had for the movie. This movie still didn't test very well, and that's also because found footage films traditionally don't test well. A big part of that is, you know, I think there's a real conceit you have to buy into with found footage movies, and most test audiences don't know what they're walking into. If it's a found footage movie, they might be pissed off if it's not something they were prepared for, you know. But the last test screening we had, you know, we didn't get a great score, but at the end of the movie, during the last scene where I die, spoiler alert, one dude in the front row stood up and raises his hands and like pumps his fists in the sky and was like just stoked. And I was like, okay, well maybe that's
nice.
Something.
Nice.
But then even going to premiere it at South by Southwest, I was just so scared. And then even when the first reviews came out, they were like fairly positive and good. I was still like, I didn't believe it. I didn't trust it. I think part of it too is like I couldn't watch it because I'm in it, you know, and so like being objective about that movie is really tough for me. But it you know, I think at this point I feel like I made a good movie just by the fact that we're talking now 10 years later and that it's had the life that it's had, and you know, I am really proud of it, and like you know, do also recognize what's special about it. And it's funny because like the things that are special about the movie, and I think the things that people like about it, are the things that I was most insecure about. So it's like been a process of me getting over that, you know.
For sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I just want to ask one quick follow-up question. We mentioned it in our review, like I've seen on Netflix that thumbnail of like Mark looking down in the outside light or whatever. Mm-hmm. How much of a like you mentioned earlier, going to like VHS stores, like me and Brian have talked about this a lot, like going to a VHS, like a video store, and like just the cover will make you want to buy, like rent a movie. How much do you think that thumbnail has affected like people wanting to watch Creep? Because like Mark is just staring at you like when you click on Netflix every time. It's like, you better watch my movie, and like, all right, I will.
Well, I mean, it's funny because like I remember the night we were shooting that scene, and that thumbnail is from the scene in the movie where things really do. I mean, it becomes night. We go from day to night, but also things shift to a darker tone at that point, and things start to feel more ominous. And I remember him walking up the stairs of this cabin and then turning and looking at me, and me being like, okay, stop, because I could just see his silhouette behind the porch light there, you know? And so, yeah, I think like being really proud of like coming up with that image on the spot in the midst of how we were shooting it was really exciting. And then also having to, you know, when you're releasing your movie, you're, you know, and no one's seen it, coming up with that first still is so crucial, because you just, you know, like a lot of times it's just like a still of the actor in the movie, and you're like, okay, that's what that is. But like coming up with a still that actually had a sense of mystery to it, I think was really fun and exciting for me, and I think really important when it came to getting people to like wonder what the fuck they were looking at, you know, and the fact that it ended up on the cover, or you know, on the poster was such a treat. And then, you know, wanting to play with it a little bit more with the second movie. We didn't really shoot a version of that for Creep Tapes that made sense. I'm happy with what Shudder ended up coming up with this sort of like pixelated multi version of Mark's face from all these different shots in the movie, because we know it's him and we know what's up now. I mean, that's part of it too, is that like the first movie, the conceit was, is this guy a killer or not? that gets revealed at the end. People know what they're getting into by Creep 2, and so we're allowed to see a little bit more of his face, you know. And then Creep Tapes were just like full on. You know what you're in for, you know.
Right.
Yeah. So Creep 2, you mentioned, it was released 3 years later in 2017, and it definitely further expanded the creepiness, for lack of a better word, of Joseph/Aaron. Was there any pressure to live up to the expectations after the first one, and how was the creative process different?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely felt pressure in that we knew we were making something for a set audience. I think part of that was the reason we took so long to make it, and then also like had a bunch of different ideas before we finally landed on the one that we landed on. And I think part of that too was realizing that I think at first we felt like this need to make something that was like really dark and really, really scary, and like that just wasn't us. Like we like that stuff, but we definitely are trying to be funny, and like see the humor in Mark's character and see the humor in the discomfort of these awkward situations. And that's like really what excites us, And obviously, we kind of doubled down on that with Creep 2, and then we doubled, tripled, quadrupled down on that in the Creep Tapes, which is funny because like I think like whatever like small bits of negative criticism we got from the Creep Tapes were like criticism about something that we weren't even attempting to do. You know what I mean? Like I think if you watch the Creep Tapes cold, it's it's a different experience than like having gone through this whole process. Like I think we made that show in the hopes that you love this character and you want to see this character in all these different environments, and so that's sort of part of the fun and conceit of the show. It's more about that and less about like, I mean, we're gonna definitely be, there's some breadcrumbs into his personal life in the show, and we'll definitely be trying to inject that more into the second season as well. But like, we're really just trying to like have fun with this character and stretch it out as long as we can. Your time with him. But I loved making Creep 2 because it was sort of a chance for us to put this character in an environment with another character who intimidated him in some way, and to see him be a little vulnerable, but also to not know if you're really seeing vulnerability or if he's lying or not, and because he is this pathological liar of a character, getting to sort of play with the truth and do this dance from moment to moment in the movie. And I think like with any horror movie, there's always this feeling of like, why don't you just get out of there? Why don't you just leave? And like these movies are the ultimate version of that, right? Because you're spending the whole movie essentially as like the other person in the room because they're so intimate, and so you're kind of in everybody's head in a way that you're not in a normal movie. And so being conscious of that is really important, but then also like getting to like play with that and push that as far as we can was what was really exciting about Creep 2. And being able to work with Desiree Akhavan, who's just awesome and is like just a really smart filmmaker but good actor as well, and I just loved her energy opposite Mark. Like it just made for some very goofy moments in that movie of discomfort,
Yeah.
Absolutely. We're getting ready to wrap up soon. But, you kind of touched on it a little bit. The Creep Tapes debuted on November 15th of last year. It continues to expand the character of Joseph and give us more chilling moments with him. How was the process been? Can you tell us just a little bit about that?
Yeah. Well, we shot the series, the first season, independently on our own. We didn't know if there was going to be a home for it or where it would end up. We just knew that we had this sort of fan base for the first two movies, and there seemed to be a demand for more. And so we ended up shooting it over the course of 2 years. I mean, it was actually, we shot one in 2023,
Oh, wow.
Mark went away to do the morning. We actually shot the last episode first.
Oh, wow.
The one with Mom, and then Mark went away to do the morning show. Came back. We shot one more episode, and then the strike happened, and so we had another like almost 6 months to twiddle our thumbs. And then once we came back from the strike, we immediately made all remaining 4 episodes in a row. And that was great because I think it gave us some time to really hone in on what we were doing, and we put it all together and then took it out into the marketplace. And Shudder just was the most enthusiastic about the movie or about the series, and really just like felt like the best home for it, because that's kind of where our audience is, and they gave us the most amount of freedom creatively, and so they've been just like amazing partners to work with. I just like can't believe that a place like that exists, that just has such great programming and just so well curated, and it feels like we get to be like big fish in a small pond, as opposed to being like on Netflix or something like that, where people really would have to dig to find it, you know.
Yeah, that makes sense for sure. Yeah, and we've partnered with Shudder on a few interviews for them and promos, and you're right, they're great. They're great to work with, great people. The last thing I wanted to ask, I want to ask, if anything, can you tell us, what to expect from season 2? But I also feel like your answer is just going to be like creepiness. So, is there anything you can tell us about that? And is there anything else that you're working on right now?
Yeah. I mean, I would say Creep Tapes is at the front of my mind right now, just because we want to try to make it so that it comes out by the end of the year at this point. So I'm deep in writing with that Mark on the second season right now. We're hoping to shoot in the spring if we can. And, I think we had like probably like 10 ideas for episodes, and we're honing in on 6. So we've got like the best 6 of the bunch that make the most sense right now. But yeah, I can't really tell you any details about any of the episodes, but just know that like we're doubling down on everything that we started to do with the first 6, and are really going to try to keep people guessing as to what's coming next from episode to episode. I mean, I think part of the fun of this show is that we get to sort of drop this guy anywhere and surprise our audience. So we're just going to keep trying to do that with the next season, and hopefully more.
Awesome.
Hey, thank you so much for joining us, Patrick. This has been a fantastic interview. It's been great chatting with you, man. We really appreciate your time.
Oh, cool. Absolutely. It's my pleasure, guys. Appreciate you so much for asking, and good luck with everything. Let me know when it comes out so I can let folks know.
Oh yeah, sure. I absolutely will.
Do you and Mark do conventions by any chance? Y'all should do it if you don't.
Yeah, it's actually something we're starting to look into now. Is there any you would recommend?
Me and Brian, we go to Spookala. It's the one in Florida. It's in Tampa. That's great. MegaCon, Spooky Empire is good. Like, that's just around us.
Yeah.
Right.
But I know you and Mark would do great anywhere, though.
Oh yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. No, it's funny. You're the second person I've talked to this week about that. So that is something that's definitely on the horizon.
And if you're in California, they have a big one out there called Creep IECon or something. Tobin Bell and all that was just out there. So
that just happened though, right? This year.
Yeah, a couple weeks ago.
Okay. Cool.
But Spookala is coming up. You need to get on that one.
Okay.
You'll be awesome.
I recently, like last night, put the finishing touches on my first script. So I'm just curious if you have any advice.
In terms of what?
I don't really know. I've had ideas for years, and I've started scripts, but this is the first one I've sent it through. Obviously, I'm not talking about how can I get this movie made and make millions of dollars. Just going forward, if I wanted to pursue this lifelong dream, like I didn't go to film school. I don't have the pedigree, but
is it a feature?
Yeah, it's about 103 3 pages, and it's a like a sports drama with some
Wow.
some
Congratulations,
family stuff.
man. I
Thank
mean,
you.
103
Thank you.
pages script is no joke. So that's, I mean, that's the first step. I mean, I don't know. I mean, my thing has always been if there's a way to make a short using the resources that are available to you that is a true short that's just like less than 5 minutes, you know, and so that can be good and that's like one idea conveyed clearly. I think that always helps, you know. The other thing I would say too, and this is like probably insane to say, but like don't just stop with one script. Like if you have another idea for something else, like keep writing. I think part of it is just the process of continuing with it. You know what I mean? Because I've definitely had friends who have gotten tripped up because they've just got that one perfect script, you know, and then it never gets made. And
So my plan for this year is one per quarter and 4 different genres. So
amazing.
Kind of keep it going.
Cool.
Well, I appreciate it a lot.
Oh, absolutely. Good luck with that, man.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it.
Cool. All right, guys.
Thank you for joining us.